So first off, who am I? I'm the digital workflow technology specialist in prod tech for Viacom. Basically, anything that's a live streaming event for Viacom kind of goes through me and my coworkers. Before that, I was with AOL, Huffington Post, and a company called NX Streaming. Helped launch HuffPost Live, launched some YouTube channels last year, done a lot of kind of one-off events for Converse, Lego, companies like that. And this year they named me a 2013 Streaming Media All-Star, so I guess maybe I know something, perhaps. So let's get started with kind of the formats that we're going to talk about today. HDS, which is basically the latest version of Flash. It's how you're pretty much going to hit most of your desktop clients nowadays, and basically any new, or actually any older Android device. HLS, you guys are all probably familiar with it. It's how you watch video on your iPhone, your iPad, and pretty much every over-the-set-top box for live. If you're going to hit a Roku box, you're going to hit, pretty much any of those, it's going to be via HLS nowadays. Smooth streaming, I'm not going to talk about it. If you want to hit the Xbox, they'll tell you to do smooth. You don't need to. You can do HLS. You'll save yourself a lot of hassle, but it's a format. It's popular in Europe. We don't deal with it ever here, really. So what is HDS? I like to describe it as basically RTMP on steroids. It's HTTP dynamic streaming. It requires a newer version of Flash Player. You can basically wrap your content into H.264, AAC. You can also do VP6, MP3, but most people nowadays are going to do H.264, AAC for a variety of reasons that I'll get to later. The difference between it and RTMP and what makes it kind of so cool is it's actually little fragments. You're not just connecting to a single stream that is just coming from the CDN to your computer. Basically, I like to go with 6-second fragments, so every 6 seconds, my player is basically downloading a new 6 seconds of content. That means that it's really convenient. Every 6 seconds, my player can basically decide, do I need to go up, do I need to go down, bitrate-wise, resolution-wise, and it can completely adapt to whatever environment you're in, which is something that RTMP, you could do it on the player level, but it was always a little clunky. In my opinion. Just one thing to note, whatever your fragment size are, really important to make sure your keyframes match it. For example, I do 6-second fragments. I always keep my keyframes at 3 seconds, occasionally 2 seconds, but I would never go to like 4 seconds because basically I'd be having chunks where there was just no keyframe at the end or the beginning. And that would cause a player basically to just get in that kind of muddled state. The thing that's so great also about HDS is it basically uses the same CDN infrastructure that is used to deliver any HTTP website. So if you're going through Akamai, you're going through Level 3, you're going through Limelight, you're going to see better performance. It's not just going to go through their proprietary FMS servers. So basically just the footprint of the CDN that you're using is expanded just infinitely. So especially if you're looking at stuff international, or you're looking at, even pretty much any region, you're going to see increased performances. It also has a whole bunch of functionality that RTMP did not have natively, such as DVR. You can seek within it. I can get my timeline, I can go back, I can go forward. I already mentioned multi-bit rate, but because of those segments, it's basically the player still obviously handles it, but you're making it a lot easier. Basically saying every 6 seconds, what do I want to download? And it's going to download that chunk, whether it be a 200K stream or a 3.5 megabit stream. The other thing is you can pretty easily, out of the box, get it to support either on QPoint or on Caption Info closed captioning, which is something that, as of recently, for anybody that's doing simulcasts or works, in a broadcast environment, we're required by law now to do it. So it was something that with RTMP you could do, but it just seems a little bit friendlier with HDS. And the other thing that makes it super easy to keep track of is rather than having to worry about all your individual streams, you basically just get a clean manifest that looks like that. So this, for example, would contain maybe 7 different renditions in it, but it's just one line that my player is going to read, and the player is going to basically say, okay, I get it. I've got these 7 renditions in there, and choose the best one. So what is HLS? It's HTTP, live streaming, wrapped H.264, HEAAC. It's also segmented. Pretty much anything over HTTP is segmented. So you get the same CDN advantage that you got with HDS, where your CDNs are going to love you because you have basically, you're just using their global footprint that they've already built out to deliver all your other content. It's also in segments, as I mentioned. For HLS, I tend to find that longer segments work better. Apple will recommend, I think they recommend 10-second chunks. I think Roku says they want 20. To be honest, I like 9. I like 3-second keyframes. 9 seconds works out well. 10 seconds doesn't. So that's pretty much what everything at Viacom we're doing. It also has the ability to have a DVR window within the manifest. It's multi-bit rate also. And it supports closed captions via SEI embedded, which is just a slightly different flavor of caption metadata. It also points to a master variant playlist. So if you actually were to like Charles a play or something, you would see that that's what the player is actually pointing to. But if you look inside of it, you basically start to see all your stream information in there. So for here, you can see at the at the top, I've got my 400K stream. At the bottom, I've got my 3.5 meg stream. And then if you actually looked inside any one of those lines, you would actually start to see the individual TS chunks that your player is actually downloading, in our instance, every 9 seconds. So encoders, how do you actually get those formats up to your CDN so that your viewers can download it? There's pretty much, in my opinion, 3 different, varieties, I would say. You have your software-based encoders, your hardware-based encoders, and then kind of this cloud hybrid that is becoming more increasingly popular. So what is software-based? It's basically just a piece of software that's going to sit on a non-proprietary piece of hardware. It's Telestream Wirecast, it's Flash Media Encoder Live. It's if you're using YouTube, it's the YouTube little downloader that you can download to just stream from your computer. The pros are it's cheap or free. It can run on pretty much any hardware. You can often get some additional functionality if you use Wirecast. You can add your own graphic overlays. You can do some audio mixing in it. You can even do some camera switching if you were to put multiple capture cards into a computer. The cons are basically you can never deliver pre-segmented HLS out of it. So you can never hit an iOS device natively out of it. You're always just going to be sending RTMP streams to the CDN. I would say another con is actually it tends to be a little bit more crash prone just because the hardware and the software aren't necessarily optimized for each other. So you're kind of, as a user, deciding what you're gonna do, and you can run into problems. Hardware-based, basically a proprietary piece of hardware that's made specifically for live streaming. Examples are the Elemental Lives, the Cisco media processors. Haivision has some. The pros are really you can encode anything out of them. You can spit 8 streams of RTMP out. You can spit 8 streams of HLS pre-segmented, so you're actually making those chunks in the encoder. You could spit out smooth if you wanted. You can pretty much do whatever you want that the device supports. The cons are a lot more expensive. You're looking at 30 grand maybe for a box, and you probably want 2 because you're going to want a primary and a backup. You may have multiple streams. It's a big investment. Which kind of gets me to what I'm going to call the software-hardware cloud hybrid. So this is where basically you're using a piece of software encoder or a hardware encoder, but you're passing a single stream or a set of streams, generally RTMP, to the cloud, where then kind of all your other renditions are getting rewrapped. So some examples of that are Wowza, Hyperstream, Unicorn Media does it, and now all the CDNs are kind of getting into that business. So the pros are basically, if I guess I'll just give an example now. Before, happens all the time at MTV. Someone says, hey, we're doing this show at Webster Hall. I've got, literally a T1 line, and oh yeah, we sold mobile. And we don't have any money though, but we sold it. So we need to support HLS, we need to support desktop. What do? We don't have money to do any transmission, so we're encoding on site. It's coming out of a TriCaster, and there's no way around that. So that's where using kind of a hybrid solution, we're using Akamai to do our repackaging right now. So out of the TriCaster, we'll send just a single RTMP stream. Akamai will rewrap it to basically to HDS and to HLS for us. And then, we're supported on basically every device. You can watch that stream on your Xbox, you can watch that stream on your iPhone, your iPad, you can watch it on the desktop. Whereas without this, with just a TriCaster and a CDN, I'm stuck basically just spitting out an RTMP stream, and you're only going to watch it on an old Android device or or your desktop. The pros are basically you can encode out of a location with a lot less bandwidth. You can generate HLS streams from devices that natively can't support pre-segmented HLS. And also, I think it makes it a little bit easier on you as as kind of the operator of all this. I'll get into it a little bit later, but when you start handling, dozens of stream names, it's a little bit easier to kind of have, the CDN or, an intermediary like Wowza or Hyperstream kind of making some of these other renditions for you, so you just don't have to worry about them. The cons, though, are there's potentially more fault points. If you're using Haivision's Hyperstream and something goes wrong and you're using Akamai as your CDN, Akamai is going to point fingers at Haivision, Haivision is going to point fingers at Akamai. Who do you really call? If it's an event and there's advertising dollars on the line, in my opinion, it may make sense just to go with the CDN because there's one person you call when there's a problem. So when you have an event, I guess kind of the question becomes, where do you actually do your encoding? There's basically two options. You can encode on-site, so your encoders are going to receive an HD SDI or I suppose an HDMI feed of your program, or off-site, where there's some kind of intermediary transmission happening and your encoders are going to receive it on that end. Some of the pros of on-site encoding are it's really easy to coordinate with production. If you need them to do a lip sync test, you just run over and grab them and say, hey, I need to do this. If there's problems on site, you're right there. You can see what's happening. And there's no need to bring in a satellite truck. There's no need to rent fiber lines or do some sort of IP transmission. And that can be an alleviated cost. The cons, though, are you need bandwidth, and in my opinion, if you're going to do a multi-bit rate show, maybe you need a lot more than just a T1 line, and you might be looking at thousands of dollars to bring bandwidth in just for a day or two, or it may not even be an option. The cons are also you need ample time really to set up your equipment on site. You're outside of your element, and something will definitely go wrong. I've never been on site and not had something go wrong. You kind of just hope that you're there early enough that it goes wrong 3 days early while you're testing, and you've figured it out by then. And I guess just kind of a recommendation if you are doing on-site is, first off, really set up as early as possible. For example, just I guess about a month ago for the movie awards, they were out on the Sony Pictures lot. The show is on Sunday. I got there with all my equipment on Wednesday. The truck was parked also on Wednesday for 3 days before I even had a feed from the truck. I was just there with my keypros, all my encoders, basically just testing everything, making sure that my bandwidth was actually good, that all the different lines back and forth from the truck to me were good, which gets to just some basic tips. don't just do a speed test. Everybody does that. They just go there, they do a speed test, they see, oh, sweet, I've got 100 megs, I'm golden. They don't realize that you're dropping tons of packets. The latency might be horrible. So, a thing that I like to do if I am doing an event on site, while I'm testing, I'll like SSH into my encoder and I'll just run a ping test to the basically the ingest point, and I'll let it run for a few hours. I'll see, am I dropping packets? Are there just some weird spikes where all of a sudden my latency is shooting up? It's just things to look for. Definitely make sure you're connecting to the nearest ingest point of your CDN. If I'm doing an event in New York, I don't want to be pushing my streams all the way across country to LA before they actually get into the CDN. I want to be pushing them in, as near as possible. Leave overhead. If you've done your math and you figure, okay, I'm going to be using 90 megs to do this show, don't say that 90 megs is what you need. I say leave 30% at least overhead, and do it for everything. If you're in a closet and there's a switcher that's, down the hallway somewhere, have them run more than one line from, the switcher to you, because you never know when, some PA is gonna roll down the hallway with something heavy, your SDI cable's somehow gonna break, it happens. The other thing is definitely test with the actual content or something similar. I can't tell you how many times people test with like static bars and tone, and it uses like a fraction of the bit rate that you actually are going to be using when you start having your confetti flying across the stage and your jib starts panning. So bring a Key Pro, bring a HyperDeck, bring something, and test with content that's similar. And test under the same conditions. Don't test while there's nothing happening. If on the day of the show there's going to be press there that's uploading, all their photographs, there's going to be people doing file transfers to get VOD clips back and forth. Just make sure you can simulate the exact environment that you're going to be on the day of the show. And this is where I would say use cloud encoding whenever possible. There's no reason if I'm on site, for me to be doing my pre-segmented HLS out of my encoder. Yeah, sure.
You said that you bring Key Pros on site. How do you get they record in ProRes?
Yeah.
Those files up to a cloud encoder?
Oh, well, I'll be using a local encoder. So let's say I'm using my Elemental, for example. I'll literally just take the SDI out of the Key Pro, plug it into my Elemental. My Elemental will be streaming like RTMP to the CDN. CDN then is going to do all the cloud encoding off of that. You need an encoder no matter what in the intermediary. Cloud encoding doesn't really work without either a software or hardware thing that you have physically at your location to get it up to the cloud. And the other thing is really think before making last minute changes. In the panic of the show an hour before, if somebody says, oh, this isn't working, don't just say, all right, we're going to pull this bit rate, we're going to do that. Like, really think about it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody, basically do something, pull out a top bit rate because they think that's what the problem is, when the problem really is just, they've got something spelled wrong on their encoder, or they've got, there's a player bug, something that's just not actually what you think it is. Offsite encoding is obviously what you kind of aim for doing. You're in a pre-tested environment. You've got a ton of hardware, hopefully at your disposal. You're in. For me, I'm in the NOC, basically the Viacom NOC. I've got a DMZ for bandwidth. I've got more encoders than I could possibly need. And it's a tested environment. When I was at AOL, we built the same thing. So I think if you're really getting into live streaming, offsite encoding is probably where you want to be if you can make all the numbers work out. The cons are you need to transmit the signal, obviously, from one site to another, which can be a potential fail point. But there are multiple options of transmission. You can do kind of the typical broadcast. We're going to park a satellite truck. We're going to feed it up to a bird, take it down. If you're a broadcaster, that's probably your option, or fiber, where you're basically using dark fiber lines back and forth across the country. But if your facility doesn't have fiber in or a satellite dish on your roof, There's a lot of exciting cellular options. There's the Live U packs, which are basically 14 cell phones in a backpack that somebody wears and hopefully doesn't get cancer, but I'm not convinced of that. I won't wear it, but basically you have your camera, you plug it into the backpack via HD SDI or HDMI. There's a server that sits in your facility that has SDI out, or it can run Flash Media Encoder on it as well. And basically, it rebonds everything together and pushes it up to your CDN. It's a great device. I've used it so many times for things. It's not obviously going to be as reliable as satellite or fiber, but even when I was at AOL, when we would do CES, that's how we would do our transmission. It was funny, to be honest. You'd have CNN would be parked there with their giant truck, and we would just have our little backpack that we, we plugged into, basically whatever the house internet was there as a backup, and just kind of hoped that the 4G was good enough, and it always was. At Viacom for things like Comic-Con and kind of conferences where you might be walking around the floor, it's perfect. It's cheap. The thing is, it'll drop out at times, so you really should test kind of in the environment that you're going to be at. Selling ads against it, you kind of have to have a backup plan. If your stream does go down, make sure that somewhere you've got something else that you could bring up, some loop of some VOD content or something, so at least your advertiser has something. I think a really exciting thing that we're seeing happen more and more is IP transmission. Evertz makes some boxes, Fujitsu makes some boxes, and basically, I'm pretty much just sending an H.264 stream point to point. The Fujitsu boxes, for example, I think they're the 920D and the 920E. There's probably about 1.5 seconds of latency, which even for live hits it's kind of acceptable. You can make it work. I think they cost about $4,000 a pop, and they're super reliable. As long as you have the bandwidth and there's no hiccups kind of on your network, it's a really reliable stream. So if you're in a convention center and you're buying 40 megs of bandwidth and you got to go to your corporate office where you've got 300, it's a total viable option. And you're not paying actually for the transmission. It's just the bandwidth. Once you have it, it's good. For example, with when I was at AOL Huffington Post, every night from basically at 6 o'clock Eastern time, the show switched over to a studio that was in LA, and all the encoding actually still happened in New York. That signal was coming over these Fujitsu boxes, and to be honest, most people probably had no idea that they were watching a signal that was being encoded twice and transmitted via IP. At Viacom, actually oversees the Daily Show. That's how it gets there. It gets there via IP. It's just there's some boxes set up, and every day when they want to feed the show there, somebody plays it out, shows up on the other end, and it's SDI out, so you can patch it into whatever your existing infrastructure is. The only thing with any of these kind of LiveU, Fujitsu type transmission methods is occasionally there are bad frames. I'd say if you do go with any of those, run it through a frame sync, invest in one. Just make sure your signal is kind of locked before you actually hit your encoders. And just, of course, be redundant whenever possible. If you're going to CES and you're using a Live U pack, maybe bring two. Maybe at least have some internet somewhere that if things go bad, you can go plug into. If it's a giant show, if we do the movie awards, we're sending, one path via satellite, one path via fiber. Just, why risk it? Things do happen. Some tips for just kind of your actual encoding profiles. When it comes to the actual difference in the bit rates, I think it's really important never to jump more than double the previous bit rate. So if your lowest bit rate, let's say, is a 200K stream, your next one should be 400. It shouldn't be 600. It tends to make the transitions a little bit more smooth, and also you can kind of start to feed users the best possible rendition. I think like when you use if you use like Ustream or Livestream, I know you're kind of limited to 3, but if you're doing it on your own, you can put, we do 7, everywhere from basically a 200K to a 3.5 meg. And don't be afraid of going to that really high encode. We do a 3.5 for everything at 1280 by 720. It looks great, and you would really be surprised. I would say a majority of our viewers actually end up on that stream at some point during a live show. When you look at kind of the trends of home internet and what our bandwidth are, I think the average person now in America does have something like 4 megs. So giving them a 3.5, most people can take it. There's no reason to stop at like 1 or 2. Really push it, especially as more and more people are actually hitting TVs. Another thing is use the same encodes for your desktop and mobile. If I'm making an HDS 200K stream, that's going to be my lowest stream on desktop, I should be feeding that exact same stream to my my older Android phones. There's no reason to kind of slightly switch the the resolution by a few pixels just to maximize it for it. It's going to cause more headache on your end. And if you're using cloud repackaging or Haivision or Akamai or Limelight now or Level 3, any of those to do it for you, it makes it a lot simpler because that same stream, I might give them the 3.5 that I give them. They're basically just going to spit out 2 versions of that, one that's HDS, one that's HLS. HLS is going to go into every device that uses HLS. HDS will go into everything that uses HDS. I'm just making matters simpler for myself. I think for your actual encoding profile, you really only have to go baseline on maybe your 200K or 400K, things that like an old iPhone 3G are gonna hit. Use main for everything else. It looks better. People tend to hesitate doing it, but nowadays you're not really going to run into problems. I would say know your QoS and definitely have QoS. I think that's probably the most important thing you could invest in. Whether if you're using Akamai, use the Akamai Media Analytics, look into Conviva. Really know kind of what a live event looks like from just a QoS point of view. Get to know the curves as viewers start to come, know what kind of buffering rates are acceptable. And just because the amount of times that, an executive calls and says, oh my God, the stream's not working, people panic, they call the CDN, they say, we're having a problem, and you look at it and it's like an isolated user. It happens a lot. And if you do start to know your QoS tools, you'll know when to panic and when not to. And which kind of gets me to look at the kind of like the isolated pictures. Don't look at the big pictures. Yesterday we were streaming the Xbox reveal on Game Trailers, which is owned by Viacom. It was a huge event, massive amounts of traffic. And at one point, suddenly I saw basically video start failures just spiking like crazy. Everyone who was looking at the QoS starts panicking. They start trying to call the CDN. You actually look at it, and it's one city in Norway that for some reason, all of a sudden, like basically 1,000 people tried to connect from, and for some reason, their ISP was blocking them. Not a reason really to panic. It's on the ISP level. It's not on the CDN level. There's nothing I can really do about it. Just kind of get to know your tools so that you actually know what's happening kind of behind the scenes. Keyframes are probably like the most important thing. I like 3 seconds. Make sure they match your segment length as I saw before. But if you use like a Wirecast or something, by default it'll say, I think it defaults to like 10 seconds. That's a really long time in my opinion. You see a lot of people then go the other way and go like 1 second, and you're just wasting so much of your bandwidth just to keep putting these full frames. There's no reason for it. I would say, 3 seconds for most things looks good. 2 seconds if it's like really kind of high-paced sports, I think works well too. When you start to go too low, you'll kind of start to see the image pulsing where it's like it's totally there. It starts to degrade a little bit, and then it just pops right back in really full. So that's something to look at. Also, try to keep your audio bit rates the same across the renditions. It's really annoying when people don't, and you'll notice it when basically if you jump from your 3500 stream to your 22, and all of a sudden it gets louder and there's kind of this audio pop. If the audio bit rates are the same, it's not going to happen. Definitely test with your actual show equipment. If you're going to be doing the show on site with a TriCaster, don't test it with like Wirecast the day before from your office. Actually go test it there with the TriCaster. And naming conventions. So many people name things like Stream 1, Stream 2, Stream 3, and you have absolutely no idea what is happening. And it's so crucial when you get into kind of the higher end events, where you're multi-camera, multi-bit rate. So just to give an example, this is the Movie Awards. This is every single stream that that I was pushing out from on site. There's a ton of them. If things were named Stream 1, Stream 2, Stream 3, nobody would have any idea what was happening. I think these are pretty apparent. MA Movie Awards 2013. Is it camera? Is it the line cut? Is it camera 2, camera 3, camera 4? And then what's the bit rate? Super simple. Figure out whatever your CDN's naming convention is that you're using, and just figure something out where like anybody could look at that and on a fly be like, okay, that's the problem. If I'm talking to the CDN and they're saying, oh, we noticed that we lost stream 6, you're gonna have no idea what encoder that's on, where that is even coming from, what it actually is. If they say, hey, we lost cam 2 400, okay, well that's my second camera 400K, got it. The joy of though, when you start handling this many streams, you can start to do, this is basically an example of our Movie Awards player. So if you see, it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different ISOs on the bottom. That's 6 different complete streams, with a window on top that the user can kind of cut their own show. So this is just an example of kind of our player that we've built. That's our multi-camera player. And for pretty much any event, we try to do this. I'd say there's a few advantages to it, actually. One thing is people actually really click around. And it's not to say it's like a cheap way to inflate your stream views, but it is. If users are clicking 20 different times, well, that's 20 different streams that they just started. And if I can get a different advertiser to pay for each of those different streams, then basically I can serve 20 brief ads that are 2 seconds or something with basically minimal viewership. It's a great tool, and I think that people nowadays are just they're kind of expecting to be able to do more, and people don't really have the attention span that I think people used to, and just giving them something to do on the page, whatever it is kind of a really, really helpful tool. And just one thing to say, this is the way we built it, but there's a lot of just hacks around it. If you do use, a YouTube, or you use a, Brightcove or Ooyala, all of them have a playlist mode. And you can always make a playlist of live players. You may not have the live thumbnails, but experiment with it. I guarantee you that whatever player you have, you can figure out a way to basically mimic something like this. And also just say, think outside the box. For things, last weekend, we did this basically 3-day live music event. It was called the Hangout Festival. And to drive views, we basically, on all of our music sites, MTV, VH1, CMT, we basically replaced the banner with basically a live player. It's basically just, basically the 2 streams, the 2 different stages. If the viewer clicks on the right, they get brought to the, basically, to watch that performance. They click on the left, they get to watch that one. And again, just, it's kind of a way with live where there is an urgency. You can't post it and hope people find it. You kind of have to tell people, hey, this is happening now, watch now, and they will. And the other thing is kind of really know your hardware. The way that we actually do these kind of MUX players is, everybody who I've talked to, they're like, how do you do it? You're ripping the stream apart and then you're re-putting it back together somewhere, in the cloud or in the player. No, it's a completely different stream. We basically just use a multi-view, like an old multi-view, and just patch that to an encoder, and then do some funky cropping on the player level. So if there's something that you kind of think in your head you want to do this, there's often a way to do it that's probably not the way that you're instinctively going to think. So just really, really know your hardware. So I think that's pretty much what I'm going to say, and then just kind of open up the floor for questions. And if anybody wants to email me, that's my email address. So feel free to. So questions, anybody? How do I QoS? So we use at Viacom, we use a combination of Akamai Media Analytics for anything that's going to be delivered via Akamai, and also Conviva. Using the two makes it really helpful to kind of verify that what one is seeing, the other one is also seeing. And we look at basically what are the failures that are coming in, what's the buffering ratio, how many seconds is a user buffering, per play, what's the average play duration, just to kind of get and also actually the other thing that I should say to looking at your QoS is you'll get an idea of what bit rates your viewers are kind of watching, and you can kind of start to know, should we really focus more on these higher end, viewers, or is it mostly people that are like on their cell phone, walking around somewhere, and you need to focus more on the low ones. But it really just gives you a complete picture, and Akamai has them, Conviva has really good ones as well.
So you mentioned the amount between bit rates when you're switching to more than 2 times. What's kind of the other end of that to avoid switching?
Yeah, that's a good point actually. At the lower ends, I actually would almost say keep it to like 2 times. What we do a 200, a 400, a 500, a 750. 1200, 1700, 2200, and 3500. So I think those do tend to hit kind of all the bases. I know some people play and add another one low, move a few of them up, but that's kind of our stack right now for live, for both HLS and HDS.
What's your thoughts on the dash? Are you guys thinking to use it or?
I think when we have to use it, we'll use it. I think, truthfully, until it's supported by, every basically device, and that's the way we have to go, we'll do it. I still think it's at least a year before things here really take off with it. I think it's like whatever we all talk about, we really want, but like realistically, it's not there. And for us to say, oh, we're going to push and we're going to like start trying to do a little bit of Dash, well, we're still going to have to support all these other formats. So until you basically say, okay, we'll do Dash and Dash will replace this, then it's just going to complicate matters more. I think in the live space, that's probably where more heads are. For VOD, it's a little bit easier because you can have more time to encode your files. You can maybe just hit one browser, just hit one kind of specific user with it just to see what's going to happen. But yeah, for live, I would say it's at least a year off.
You mentioned live view for cellular transmission out of an event. Can you talk about your experience in general about using multiple 4G modems going out? And have you ever had to rely on that, or are you just putting better? No, for the live view packs, while I was at AOL, we used them all the time. Every single time there was an Apple event and Engadget would do live stand-ups from outside of it, it was always with a live view pack. They were always actually pretty reliable. I was surprised, even when the new iPhone came out, they went to the Fifth Ave store and were like in the mass of like all those people right there on Fifth Ave. And occasionally it would freeze up for a second, but just kind of the ability to be in that throng of people moving, there's no other real way you could do it. And so our experience was actually really, really positive. If you're driving around, there was last year for the Viacom OMA Awards, they drove like cross country using one, and they would go under a bridge, it would go out. But for the most part, I feel like it's actually pretty reliable. The stream quality will drop at times. If you actually are looking at the monitor on it, it tells you how much bandwidth you're using. And at the top, you might be using 4 megs, but you might be, kind of hit a really congested point. It drops down to you only have 400K, but there's at least still an image going through. And so I think for internet audiences, it's kind of more acceptable. And kind of for that guerrilla style, we're like in the throng, we're really going to give you that like up close experience. I think viewers are kind of okay with the fact that the quality may drop at times, but it rarely ever just completely disconnects and you have to reboot it. I think the only time we ever had that happen, it was like a problem with the actual box. So.
You prefer pushing out RTMP and the CDN?
I prefer pushing out RTMP and having the CDN do it for me. To me, I can't tell the difference. If I A/B them side by side, it's just there's not a noticeable difference, and it's one less thing for me to worry about. At the encoder level, it's one less thing that I have to set up, and so and it's kind of just one less failure point. Yeah, I mean for us, it's not so much the bandwidth. I've got plenty. We're in our NOC. It's really just a matter of it's one other thing that I have to set up for an event. It's one other place that I could enter a digit wrong or type the password in wrong for the Akamai authentication. It kind of just keeps things simpler. And if you're using Akamai, the other advantage to it is you can use their basically their live archive management tools. So you actually can trim your DVR really easy for HLS, which otherwise you basically can't do it. You'd have to rewrite your own manifest, and it's a complete pain. So, yeah. I guess if there are any more questions, cool. Well, I'll stay up here for a few minutes if anyone wants to